For serious YouTubers, save time and money with TubeBuddy, the premier tool used at geekoutdoors.com. Get more done today by checking out the affiliate link in the description area below.
Hey, welcome to another episode of geekoutdoors.com. So last year, Microsoft made some very big and surprising moves into the world of Linux. The first being is that they officially became a platinum member of the Linux Foundation. Now that alone would probably shock the entire open source community, but they didn't stop just there. They also provided Linux virtual machines in their Microsoft Azure cloud services, which is one of the fastest growing and most profitable sectors of Microsoft's business. And then finally, they offered something called WSL, or Windows Subsystem for Linux, starting with Windows 10 and now recently within Windows Server itself. And if you're not familiar with what this is, well, basically what they're doing is they are actually putting in Ubuntu Bash Shell natively within Windows 10. And if you're not familiar with what that is, if you open up your command line, Bash is the default command line tool used for pretty much every Linux distribution for Mac OS, and obviously this came out of the Unix shell world. So this has huge implications primarily for developers. And so with this, people who are developers are able to run tools that are natively work better within Linux Bash. Okay, and so for Ruby, Python, Perl, there's so many areas where it just runs better natively versus using some type of virtualization or virtual machine. Okay, and so why are they doing this? Well, before we get into that, let's go and see how this actually works. Okay, and so if you actually go into Windows 10, you could do this yourself if you like. What you would do is, let me go ahead and set this to full screen. Okay, and so what you would do is you would go into your settings. Okay, then you would go into developer tools where it says for developers, and you would turn on developer mode. Okay, now once you've done that, you would go into your start menu. On search, type in Windows features. Okay, and just go here, and then if you scroll down after you turn on the developer mode, you'll notice there's something called Windows Subsystem for Linux, and it says beta. Just put on a checkbox, say okay, and then it'll go ahead and add this, and then you're actually going to have to restart your machine. Okay, now why this is important, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that developers who do things in Ruby, in Python, Perl, all of these programming languages, they actually run better in Linux, okay, because they natively work better with Linux, Bash, and also other open source tools. And so by Microsoft Windows doing this, they really give developers more tools through actual Windows itself. Okay, and so what that means is they're able to get in developers who wouldn't normally use Windows because they were reliant on tools available within Linux. Okay, and that's why they're primarily doing it. Okay, they do give developers more option, but much like everything else that they have been doing here recently in the Linux world, it's for their long-term business goals. That's really why they're doing it, because whenever Steve Ballmer left, Microsoft, the culture started to change. Now let me go here and let me see if you could find it. If you just type in Ubuntu Bash, let me see if that works. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's type in Bash. Okay, so and it does says that this will install Ubuntu Bash. Okay, so it'll go ahead and install it directly from the Windows Store. And Canonical, who are the actual owners or the creators of the Ubuntu distribution and the company that surrounds it, they actually worked with Microsoft to actually provide this. And this is officially the same Bash that you actually have in Ubuntu. Okay, now the only difference is it doesn't actually go down to the Linux kernel, because obviously you are on Microsoft Windows here, so it actually works with the Windows kernel. But everything else on here, as far as I've seen, this is really bash, just like you would have when you're running Ubuntu or most Linux distributions. And as I was stating a little bit earlier, whenever Nadella came in as CEO, unlike Steve Ballmer, who was really basically anti everything that wasn't Microsoft, okay? Now, that was not good for business, okay? Nadella looked at it from a different point of view. He looked and saw how you could leverage Microsoft and offer more things that are cross-platform and also be more quote-unquote open, okay, while still being Microsoft, okay? So he's thinking more of the long term, okay? And so, and I have mentioned this in other videos, Microsoft isn't doing this because they love open source or Linux. If anything, if Linux didn't exist, they would be extremely happy, okay? And they would have a really huge competitor out of the way because, Microsoft makes the majority of their money in the business space, and a lot of businesses use Linux, okay? Primarily in the server world, but also in the development community as well. And so by doing this, Microsoft is actually taking out another advantage that Linux has. Okay, now in one case you could look at it and say, well, this is good for the Linux community. Yeah, that is. It's going to introduce a bash or a Linux bash, Ubuntu within Windows itself, which is good. But really, who it's going to benefit more in the future is Microsoft. Okay, similarly, they did the same things when it came to actually in the mobile space as well. So if Windows Phone really didn't work out well, and as a matter of fact, Microsoft was the very first company to offer a mobile phone operating system for, I guess, the masses, mostly with business first with Windows CE, and that didn't work out. And so instead of trying to, let me see, I'm gonna have to create a username. Let's just call this Linux. Okay. All right. Let's just put that in there. All right, and so if you look here, let me see, LSB, and this is my first time installing this, so there, and so I'm using this for the first time. Now, if you could see here, LSB release, this is a command that would tell you information about your distribution. And as you can see here, this is natively bash from Ubuntu 16.04.2, as you can see. So this truly is bash. It's not some virtualization. And if you typed in different commands, this is really it. And then let me see. I go here. Okay. And I'm looking at all the different drives. So these are different mount points. There's a CD drive. So if I go there, which most Windows users would be familiar with, see, it's actually the Windows, directories right here. So I'm seeing everything inside my C drive, and this is kind of cool. Okay, so let me see. See if this works. And so as you can see here, this really is bash. This really is something that you would be familiar with. And at the same time, if you are a developer, this is great, because this allows you to run programs that you would run natively within Linux, now within Windows. Okay. And, not everything's going to be exactly the same. Okay. Because since you don't have access to the actual Linux kernel itself, there's certain things that you might not be able to do, but for the most part, this is it. And I could see how this is going to be great for people who are developers, and at the same time, for people who, for some developers, they might have a Linux box or Linux within a virtual machine to do all of their actual programming, because it's a pain to actually do it within Windows because it's not native. But now with this, they don't have to worry about that. Okay, I mean, with this, they're going to be able to, not have to actually have a separate machine, and or have it in a virtual machine. And that's exactly what Microsoft wants. They want to do whatever they can to keep people on the Windows platform. Okay, even if that means providing Linux Bash or other Linux related tools or more compatibility. And that's why I was saying it's really smart of Nadella to actually do this from a long-term business point of view. So this is a really masterful move, I mean, and I really believe that in the future they are going to offer their own Linux distribution as well. See, so everything here that you would do in Bash, it works. I'm just showing you this because it actually does work. And in my opinion, what do I think about it? Do I think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because, if you are introducing more Linux within Windows, especially if it's native, that's awesome. Okay, it might bring more people over to the Linux world. Okay, but the drawback to that is that it could also keep people from leaving Windows. Okay, and that would not be a good thing. Okay, and so and that's, I think, the danger of trusting too much within Windows. And we actually as Linux users know this. Okay, so I'm just doing something really geeky here, so not super geeky, but there was no content in there. Let me see if I could do that again. So yeah, so it's something that was very surprised of at the beginning, but I wasn't surprised because I knew why they were doing it. Okay, and now that they're offering this natively, not only within Windows 10 but in Windows Server, which is really the market that Linux has a lot of power in when it comes to being a competitor to Microsoft, that's where it's going to be very interesting. Okay, so in the one case, I'm glad that Linux is being introduced to Windows more and more natively, and that Linux in other areas like with the Azure cloud services is also being made available. I'm just always going to keep my eyes more open because with Microsoft, their motives for doing it, like I said, it is business. But in the end, I think as they get more and more of their influence within Linux, that's where it's going to impact people within the open source community. Because if they're going to be introducing more of Microsoft within Linux, then they're going to be able to exert more control. Okay, so that's where I really feel that it's going to end up in the end, because right now they're allowing Linux into Windows. But eventually, that's why I mentioned the whole Microsoft Windows Linux distribution that I'm pretty sure they're going to make. Eventually, they're going to be offering more and more of Microsoft services and products, and also their brand and influence within the whole Linux, and then in a larger scale, the open source community. So much like they did in the whole mobile space, where they're offering Windows services within Android and iPhone, Apple's iOS, they're also going to be doing the same thing within Linux. And so those are my thoughts on it. I think having WSL in here is cool, really cool, especially for developers. But at the same time, it's Microsoft, and so you kind of have to keep your eyes open on that. And so if you had any thoughts on WSL being provided for Windows Server here recently natively, and also just their whole intentions with Linux, be sure to leave it in the comments area below. And as always, if you did get value out of these videos, leave a like and subscribe. And if you wanted to support my channel further, you could do that at patreon.com/geekoutdoors. Thanks for checking out this episode. And as always, if you like these videos, be sure to click on the subscribe button. And for full written content, audio content, and additional geek stuff, head over to geekoutdoors.com, and I'll see you outdoors on the very next episode.